In every person's life, there come moments when the familiar perception of the world seems to shift. It's not always possible to pinpoint the exact cause of these changes, but a certain inner feeling makes you see the surrounding reality in a different light. What goes unnoticed by most suddenly pierces to the depths of the soul. Silence becomes more eloquent than the loudest noise. The ability to feel someone else's sadness appears, even if that person is silent about their experiences. The pain of another echoes with your own suffering, as if someone else's pain becomes your own. This is not something you choose, it has simply always been a part of you. As Carl Jung said, special souls are forged not in comfort, but in the quiet flame of self-analysis. Perhaps that's why, from early childhood, there's a feeling that you don't quite fit into the surrounding world, as if your soul came from another time, another place. Life poses questions that never occur to others. Your gaze is directed inward, while others look outward. A sense of deep loneliness arises not from physical solitude, but from the realization that no one understands your feelings. But this heightened sensitivity, this depth of perception, is not a flaw, but rather a sign pointing to the presence of something special inside, a soul, but not just any soul, a soul capable of perceiving, foreseeing, and connecting, a soul that sees the invisible, feels what others deny, and carries within it a truth so ancient that it is sometimes difficult to express in words. And ahead lies something important that will unfold at the most unexpected moment if you trust your feelings and are not afraid to be yourself. If you have ever felt out of sync with the world, whether due to excessive emotionality, a tendency to deep reflection, or the intensity of your experiences, the reason lies in the world's unpreparedness to perceive such profound souls. However, this is not a sign of brokenness or being lost, but rather evidence of awakening, a state of awareness amidst a sleeping world. The awakening of the soul entails the transformation of everything around it. Having a special soul often means a sharper perception of everything that happens, which is due not to weakness but to high sensitivity, allowing you to penetrate through the superficial layers of life. You feel the emotions of others as if they were your own, deeply experience someone else's pain, and often bear the burden of silence that remains unheard. The world may label you, accuse you of exaggerating, demand more resilience, urge you not to delve into reflections and not to experience such strong feelings. However, it does not realize that another way of life is simply impossible, and this is not a curse, but a hidden blessing. Carl Jung argued that the soul must go through a collision with its shadow to reveal its light. Possessing an intensity incomprehensible to many, you have gone through internal storms that most could not even imagine. Questions arose about purpose, there was a feeling of inner emptiness, and the question of the meaning of everything was asked again and again. And yet, you continue your path, seeking, asking, feeling. The inner voice, often called the soul, conducts a silent dialogue with each person, but not everyone is able to hear it. Sometimes people drown it out with the verbosity of everyday hustle and bustle, distractions and artificial masks that hide the true self. But there are those who have learned to be alone with themselves, even when it is associated with painful experiences, who know how to listen to the silence of their inner world despite the overwhelming fear. They have grasped the truth that wounds cannot be denied or ignored. They should be respected and valued. After all, it is what caused the pain that ultimately shaped them as a person. Scars left by life's trials do not distance them from their true essence, but on the contrary, return them to it. That is why their soul is special, because it chose not to resort to anesthesia, but to awaken to conscious life. This awakening may be uncomfortable and even painful, but it is also sacred. In a world where everyone strives outward, in pursuit of material wealth and external success, they have learned to delve into themselves, into their inner world. While many seek answers to their questions in external sources, they close their eyes and begin to ask deeper questions. Who am I? What should I give to this world? What does it really mean to live in accordance with my true nature? And although they don't have all the answers, the very fact of asking these questions sets them apart from others. These doubts do not distance them from themselves, but, on the contrary, lead them directly to their truth. The bottom line is that a special soul is defined not by what it achieves in life, but by what it transforms within itself. Each time they choose forgiveness over resentment, when they allow themselves to cry even though the world demands they remain strong and tough, when they open their hearts despite the risk of being hurt, they demonstrate the true strength that lies within them. A person's inner peace does not need validation through success or recognition from others, as it exists on a completely different frequency. Despite moments of loneliness, this inner essence never loses its way. Feeling out of place and the sensation that someone might seem too much for others actually indicates the beginning of harmony with oneself. A special soul comes into this world not to conform to generally accepted standards, but to awaken consciousness, initiate transformations, and remind others of the forgotten aspects of their own essence. As Carl Jung noted, an unlived life is like a disease capable of leading to death. Even if a person sometimes hides or remains silent about their truth, life always smoulders within them, striving for full disclosure. This inner fire does not go out, and even the deepest wounds cannot overshadow its light. The uniqueness of the soul lies not only in its special perception of the world, but also in a mission that goes beyond the ordinary. This mission does not always manifest in grand actions. Often it lies in the subtlest manifestations, in the ability to be there in silence, in the ability to listen without judgment, and in supporting those who have forgotten how to support themselves. Perhaps such actions do not always receive recognition, but the soul does not need applause, it only values truth. An individual endowed with a unique inner world is not capable of following the beaten paths intended for others. They experience fatigue from external bustle and triviality, from the need to conform to generally accepted standards. They are not attracted to false faces and undeserved honors. In the depths of their being, an unquenchable thirst for something more meaningful, authentic, and intimate matures. This search for truth is often fraught with difficulties, as the awakening of consciousness exposes the degree of spiritual slumber in which the world resides. A person begins to notice dissonance in everyday life, suffering hidden beneath the mask of well-being, and fear passed off as ambition, disunity disguised as normalcy. However, they cannot turn a blind eye to this. Attempts to adapt, fit in, and fulfill prescribed roles do not bring satisfaction, leaving a feeling of emptiness and internal discomfort, as if a silent voice whispers, "This is not your calling." This feeling is not weakness, but a manifestation of intuition, the voice of the soul calling to return to the true self, to that part of the personality that has not succumbed to compromises and has not completely faded. It is in the epicenter of discomfort, in the thick of the unknown, in the feeling of one's own alienation, that the true metamorphosis of personality begins. For outstanding souls manifest themselves not in moments of serenity, but are tempered in the crucible of chaos, in the torment of doubts, in the pangs that prompt them to self-analysis. When a person turns their gaze inward, something transformative happens. They stop looking for answers in the external world, and they no longer need the approval of others to confirm their own feelings. They begin to turn into their own fortress, into their personal mentor. It is there that they discover something colossal. What previously caused them suffering now opens up new horizons. What previously separated them from others now unites them. What previously embarrassed them now reveals their potential. For a soul that has learned the art of being alone with itself is no longer afraid of its inner light. And then everything takes on new meaning. An individual is no longer hurt by their difference from others. They begin to value their uniqueness. They realize that their purpose is not to conform to generally accepted standards, but to expand the boundaries of the possible, that they are called not to copy the paths of others, but to blaze new trails where they did not exist before. A person who has reached a certain level of maturity ceases to strive for universal recognition and begins to seek the company of those who are able to understand their inner world. True intimacy arises not from external attributes, but from a deep resonance of souls. By raising their own vibrations, they notice how everything around them changes. A special soul has the amazing ability to awaken others with its mere presence. There is no need for grand actions to change the world for the better. Sometimes a glance, the ability to listen, and simply being there are enough to light a light in those corners where darkness reigned. But this is not given to everyone. To gain this strength, it is necessary to go through one's own trials, experience falls and doubts, and ask questions that others were afraid to say out loud. It is important not to remain a prisoner of pain, but to go through it, turning it into wisdom, compassion, and not ostentatious but true strength. People who have gone through personal hell gain humility. They no longer need to assert themselves or prove their worth because they know their value, and this knowledge, though unspoken, is felt by those around them. Such a person's soul is unique because it refuses to merely survive. It strives for a life filled with meaning, depth, and authenticity. Everything artificial and false becomes an unbearable burden for them. There comes a moment in a person's life when meaningless conversations, superficial relationships, and others' ambitions lose their significance. This isn't due to a sense of superiority, but rather an awareness of the value of one's own life energy. When an individual allows themselves to be genuine and open, the world around them begins to change. There's no longer a need to chase illusory goals or prove one's worth. Instead, a person begins to attract what resonates with them and effortlessly releases what they once desperately clung to. There's a realization that true values don't require imposition, and what is destined will find its way. At this stage of life, the search for belonging transforms into a pursuit of truth, conscious presence, and inner peace. A subtle yet profound transformation occurs within. The past is no longer seen as a series of mistakes, but as invaluable experience that prepared one for spiritual awakening. Forgiveness of offenses arises not from denial of pain, but from compassionate understanding. A person begins to feel deep gratitude not only for pleasant moments, but also for the trials that hardened their spirit, endowed them with wisdom, and made them more sensitive to the world around them. Their inner world is unique because they consciously chose the path of awakening in an environment where many prefer to remain dormant. They are not satisfied with superficiality and strive to grasp the very essence of things, and it's quite possible that this aspiration has often made them feel lonely, but this loneliness was not a punishment, but a kind of preparation, a period of silence necessary to hear the voice that no one else could have told them, their own inner voice. Now they realize that all their experiences were not an exaggeration, but a manifestation of special sensitivity. The intensity of their feelings was not a burden, but a compass pointing in the right direction. Their unique way of loving, deep and different from the generally accepted one, is exactly what this world needs. They should not change, lose their individuality, or hide, because there are already too many monotonous copies in the world. Their soul is unique. Genuine soul awakening is not a spectacular event, a sudden epiphany, or a striking insight. It's rather a quiet, intimate process, almost imperceptible to the external observer, but radically transforming the person from within. It's as if the disparate or dormant parts of their being begin to reunite, as if a long-awaited event is finally taking shape. There comes a moment of truth when the former way of life becomes unbearable. Meaningless conversations cause rejection, work that suppresses personality seems like hard labor, and relationships that are based only on inertia lose all meaning. The soul, striving to conserve its energy, shows selectivity, which is dictated not by selfishness, but by vital necessity. A person realizes that their purpose is not to waste themselves in vain, but to unlock their potential and bloom from within. Often the most outstanding personalities are those who have gone through the crucible of the most difficult trials, not because they deserved suffering, but because they needed to face the darkness in order to remember their true essence. Truth is often revealed only in the dark, and deep understanding is born when the familiar world collapses. At this moment, having lost support, a person discovers that they are what they have been looking for so long, Everything they aspired to already lived inside them, waiting for its time. The world appears in a completely different light. What seemed like chaos is perceived as a necessary movement, and what felt like a loss becomes liberation. A person begins to trust the course of events, even without understanding their logic. They learn to let go of what is leaving and not to ask for what is not given. A quiet wisdom awakens within, guiding their steps. And even if confidence is not always present, the soul knows the right path, and that is enough. In modern society, individuals are often required to demonstrate logical thinking, high productivity, and predictability in their actions. However, a person's inner essence does not obey strict rules and timeframes. The soul lives according to cyclical processes, develops in a spiral, communicates through symbols, and expresses itself through intuitive sensations. When a person stops resisting the natural needs of their soul, their perception becomes clearer and more distinct. Life may not get easier, but it gains authenticity and sincerity. Over time, there's a realization that true satisfaction and fulfillment in life are achieved not by conforming to the expectations of the world around you, but through a deep commitment to your inner self, which quietly whispers about your true aspirations. And this, despite its seeming subtlety, has a profound impact on all aspects of life. Your gait changes, your choices change, your creativity changes, your love changes. A person's unique soul came into this world not to be understood by everyone, but to remind them that full self-expression does not require societal approval. The most significant transformation associated with having a special soul lies not in external achievements, but in internal experiences. There comes a moment when a person realizes that true development is not measured by awards, titles, or recognition, but by the ability to be in harmony with oneself, the ability to support oneself in moments of solitude, and loyalty to one's principles, even if it means disappointing others' expectations. Inner devotion to oneself is not a sudden revelation, but the result of a long journey, strewn with mistakes and betrayals of one's own principles for the sake of approval from others, the desire to fit into someone else's framework, and the fear of losing the little that one seemed to have. However, a unique soul cannot exist for long away from its true self. It may try to distract itself, get lost in the labyrinths of others' expectations, but sooner or later, a moment of truth arrives when the lie becomes unbearable, first and foremost to oneself. When that moment arrives, a radical change occurs. The person stops obsessively chasing illusory goals, realizing that many of them were imposed from the outside. Achievements that seemed important turn out to be just masks, hiding the true face. Relationships mistaken for strongholds appear as false refuges, designed to drown out the inner discomfort of being alone with oneself. At first, this is a painful process because everything built on someone else's foundation begins to crumble. The person feels empty, disoriented, and even embarrassed, but amidst this chaos, a new hope is born. Like a timid spark, barely noticeable but so real that it cannot be ignored, it is the soul reminding you of who you really are. And from this intimate source begins the process of rebuilding, no longer to please someone, not to stand out from the crowd, but to be yourself in all your fullness, with all your strengths and weaknesses, contradictions and truth. On the path of self-discovery and return to oneself, profound changes occur, affecting the very essence of interaction with the world around. There is no longer a need to rush to be understood by others, as an awareness of one's own value and understanding of oneself emerges. From this inner harmony comes the authenticity of existence. The person becomes more discerning in the choice of information, more conscious in their words, and more careful about those with whom they share their energy. The ability to set boundaries becomes an expression of self-love, not an attempt at rejection. Solitude, previously perceived as punishment, turns into a sacred space where the soul gains strength, creativity blossoms, and intuition becomes sharper. When a person learns to be at peace alone with themselves, their life is transformed. There are no more desperate attempts to fill inner voids, no tolerance for deceit when crumbs are passed off as love. External confirmation of one's own significance becomes superfluous because inner value is not questioned. From this new state of self-sufficiency, a person begins to create a new, more harmonious life. No longer influenced by external factors, the person begins to be guided by their inner intuition, which, despite its subtlety, is incredibly accurate. The ability arises to intuitively determine what is in harmony with their essence and what is alien to it. Logical explanations take a back seat, giving way to sensations that arise at the level of the body, energy, and soul. This new approach, although it may cause misunderstanding among others, gives a sense of freedom. Freedom from imposed stereotypes, others' expectations, and allows one to live in accordance with one's own beliefs. In this state, inner harmony contributes to the favorable development of events. Life does not become cloudless, but the need for perfection disappears. There comes the realization that even in chaos, one can find their charm, that losses can bring unexpected gifts, and that every trial, even the most difficult, is a valuable lesson that helps one return to their true self. As the process of reunification with oneself deepens, priorities naturally change. What seemed urgent loses its significance. What kept you awake at night no longer attracts attention. This transformation doesn't stem from indifference, but from the realization that much suffering arises from focusing on things beyond our control. Having ascended to a new level of awareness, one begins to shed the obsessive need to control every aspect of existence, to solve all the mysteries of the universe, and to shoulder burdens that were never theirs to bear. A sense of weightlessness emerges, not because life's trials have become less severe, but because the desperate need to maintain control, driven by fear and the desire for approval, has vanished. There's an understanding that everything has its unique rhythm, that events unfold in due time, and that people and circumstances depart when their roles are complete. The futile resistance to inevitable change ceases, the pleas to preserve what is slipping away disappear, and attempts to justify the unjustifiable fade. Finally, one realizes that there is no need to fight for what rightfully belongs to them from birth, inner peace, unwavering truth, and a unique life path. In the midst of these transformations, one discovers a completely different perception of time. There's no longer room for haste or the pursuit of an illusory success imposed from the outside. Attention turns to the beauty of simple moments, to the healing oases of silence, and to much-needed pauses. What once seemed bleak and monotonous transforms into a quiet haven, and what was desperately sought in the external world, validation, emotional attachment, and meaning in life, begins to blossom within one's own being. For one has grasped a simple truth: the more one gives to themselves, the less they depend on what the world cannot offer. Over time, this inner connection with oneself becomes so all-encompassing that it is reflected in every aspect of one's life, in their manner of speaking, their gait, their ability to listen to others. There is no longer a need to possess all the answers. It is enough to simply be present, to look deeply into things, and to offer support from a pure heart. Authenticity becomes the primary means of self-expression, and this, effortlessly, transforms the space around them. One begins to realize that their presence has an impact, even without words. Their tranquility speaks louder than any statement, and their ability to see another person without judgment creates an atmosphere in which others can breathe freely. This doesn't arise from a sense of superiority, but because one has been in the darkness and remained there long enough to study it, understand it, and return, bearing light. This is one of the greatest gifts of a special soul, the ability to return from the abyss with a message. Not everyone is capable of this. Many prefer to run, distract themselves, or numb their feelings, but this person chose to go through it all, and now they can accompany others without invading their personal space, understand without imposing their point of view, love without seeking to possess, and guide without manipulating. They have learned to do for themselves what they can now offer to others. One ceases to be tormented by the desire to save the world and desperately show themselves to others. They begin to follow their inner feelings, finding self-sufficiency in this. Those who share their views naturally gravitate towards them, while others choose their own path, and this does not cause them the slightest regret. There is no longer a need to belong to any group, only a striving for inner peace. It is at this moment that one realizes that their heightened sensitivity was not a weakness, but an unappreciated gift. Their need for depth, for understanding the essence of things, was not a flaw, but a call of the soul. The discomfort arising from encounters with superficiality and triviality was not a manifestation of arrogance, but a reflection of their purpose. To go further, beyond the obvious and ordinary, against the opinion of the majority. Of course, not everyone is able to understand such a path. Some will find it too complicated, others will consider it contrived. But one no longer feels the need to justify themselves, as they have reconciled with their uniqueness. Instead of hiding their difference, they begin to value it, because it is in it that their essence, their truth, their strength lies. If the above has resonated in your heart, if you feel a certain predestination in being here and now, perhaps it is time to cast aside all pretenses and present yourself to the world as you truly are. It is time to honor your sensitivity, to see in it not a weakness but a strength, and to accept your uniqueness not as a curse but as a priceless gift. The world is tired of false facades. It needs sincere, enlightened souls like yours. So if this message haunts you like a persistent melody, if your mind has suddenly recalled what your soul has always known but was afraid to admit, consider this an invitation to continue a journey together where we will explore uncharted territories, where mind, soul, and consciousness merge into one, opening new horizons of understanding and self-discovery.